Before we get started, if you enjoy stories about hidden strength and heroes who come from the most unexpected places, you're in the right place. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's get to the story. The roar from the Xylos Tribunal wasn't a cheer, it was a tidal wave of ridicule that crashed over the lone human as she stepped onto the central platform. Her armor was a mess, a chaotic patchwork of mismatched plates that looked like a joke next to the gleaming, ceremonial battle suits of the Xylos warriors in the stands. They pointed and laughed at the crude welds, the dented shoulder, the jarring mix of colors. The jeers just kept getting louder until a single, sharp command sliced through the noise. High Commander Vorlag raised a hand. His eyes weren't even on the warrior. They were fixed on the scarred, unmistakable piece of metal covering her heart. The human, Alera, just stood there in the middle of the grand amphitheater. She wasn't defiant, but she wasn't submissive either. She was just still, a profound quiet that seemed to soak up all their mockery and give nothing back. To the Xylos, a species obsessed with martial pride and the pristine look of their wargear, she was an absolute disgrace. Their armor was art, forged from special alloys, polished to a mirror shine, and etched with the history of their house. It screamed discipline and strength. Elara's armor screamed scrapyard. Look at that chest plate, one young warrior shouted, his own golden armor practically blinding. Looks like she hammered it out of an old cargo container. His friends chortled, their laughter a series of sharp, clicking sounds. The shoulder guard is from a Crescian freighter. Primitive junk. And is that a leg guard from a mining drone? By the ancestors, she's a walking junk pile. The insults were specific, picking her apart piece by piece. They saw a left shoulder piece of dull, pitted iron, crudely bolted to a chest plate of a totally different material, a strange, dark crystal that seemed to absorb the light. Her right gauntlet was sleek, almost elegant, but it was attached to a forearm guard that was just a brutal slab of industrial plating. Her greaves didn't match. One was clearly Xylos though, busted up and repainted, while the other was a clunky, functional piece they didn't recognize. The crude welding scars holding it all together were, to them, the biggest insult. It showed a lack of skill, a lack of respect, a lack of honor. Elara's helmet was down, her face hidden. She didn't flinch, didn't speak. She just stood there, breathing steadily, as the waves of contempt washed over her. She'd been summoned to answer for crimes in the border territory, scavenging, illegal salvage, defying military orders. To the council, her appearance just confirmed it all. She was a scavenger, and this was her uniform. Magistrate Krell, the presiding official, slammed his gavel. Order. The accused will state her name for the record. Elara's head tilted. Her voice, coming through her helmet speaker, was calm and clear. Elara, of the human vessel Wanderer. A ship with no registry, Krell sniffed. How fitting. Elara, you're accused of actions that have dishonored the Xylos Dominion. Your very presence here in this mess is an insult. Do you have anything to say before we pass judgment? The chamber quieted, leaning in with cruel excitement. They wanted to hear her beg or make excuses or maybe even fly into a rage. They didn't expect the silence that followed. Elara said nothing. She just stood, a monument of mismatched metal. The laughter started to bubble up again. And that's when High Commander Vorlag, who had been silent on his throne overlooking it all, raised his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the total authority of the highest military office in the Dominion. The chamber went dead silent. Every eye shot to Vorlag. He was an old warrior, his own ceremonial armor, a dark bronze covered in the scars of 100 battles. His face was a mask of discipline, impossible to read, but his eyes were locked on Elara. He ignored the magistrate. He ignored the crowd. He spoke right to the human, his voice a low rumble that reached every corner of the arena. That chest piece, Vorlag began, his words slow and measured. Where did you get it? The question was odd. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd. It was just a piece of junk, wasn't it? Magistrate Krell looked flustered. High Commander, the origin of this scavenger's scrap is hardly relevant. It is the only thing that is relevant, Vorlag snapped, his gaze never leaving Elara. I will ask again. Where did you get it? Elara was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, she raised her hands and unclasped her helmet. Pulling it off, she revealed a human face, younger than they expected, etched with fatigue and a sorrow that felt ancient. Her hair was cut short and practical. Her grey eyes met Vorlag's without a trace of fear. It was a gift, she said simply. Vorlag rose from his seat, sending a shockwave of alarm through the assembly. He walked down the steps from the high dais, his heavy footsteps echoing in the stone hall. He stopped right in front of Alera, towering over her. The crowd held its breath, expecting him to strike her down for her audacity. Instead, he reached out a single, massive finger and gently, almost reverently, traced the edge of a deep gouge on the crystalline chest plate. There are only 2 shields ever forged of Titanian crystal, Vorlag said, his voice now a quiet whisper that somehow carried with terrible clarity. Mine, and the one that belonged to Supreme Commander Kythar. A collective gasp swept through the chamber, a sound of disbelief giving way to horror. Kythar, their greatest hero, the commander who fell in the disastrous battle at Sector 9, a loss that was still an open wound for the Xylos. Vorlag looked at the crude welding. He saw now that it wasn't crude at all. It was desperate. It was functional. It was someone trying to hold something precious together, not a scavenger slapping junk together. Impossible, Magistrate Krell sputtered. The commander's shield was lost with him. Destroyed. But Vorlag wasn't listening. His eyes were scanning the rest of her armor, seeing it now, not as a pile of junk, but as a mosaic of history. His gaze fell on the dull iron pauldron on her left shoulder, high in the stands. An old veteran leaned forward, his eyes wide. He grabbed the arm of the young warrior next to him. That pauldron, the old one rasped. The pitting, the scarring, that's not rust. That's from the acid spores of the Groll, from the siege of Viridia. I was there. I saw Lieutenant Valerius' unit get overrun. He used his own body to shield the evacuees. That was his pauldron. A few rows over, a woman from the Dominion's historical archive stared at Elara's right gauntlet. The filigree, she whispered to her aide. That's the mark of the Star Vipers, Kythar's personal honor guard. They were all lost at Sector 9. Every single one. The whispers weren't mockery anymore. They were of dawning, horrified recognition. One by one, veterans and historians began to identify the pieces. The dented leg guard belonged to a warrior who died protecting a medical station. The forearm plate was a piece of hull from the frigate's stalwart Heart, which famously rammed a dreadnought to let Kythar's command ship escape a trap. Every piece they had laughed at was a relic, a fragment of a fallen hero, a piece of a story of sacrifice. This wasn't a scavenger's armor. It was a memorial. The entire chamber had gone from a cauldron of ridicule to a tomb of silent awe. They were looking at a ghost. A woman who carried the ghosts of their greatest heroes. The mismatched colors, the welds, the dents they had scorned. They weren't signs of dishonor. They were scars of honor earned in battles the Dominion had tried to forget. Finally, Vorlag stepped back, his face a storm of grief, shame, and profound respect. He looked at the young, tired human before him. Who are you? He asked, the question now carrying a completely different weight. Alera took a deep, steadying breath. The silence of the arena was absolute, a crushing weight of expectation. Every Xylos, from the youngest recruit to the oldest veteran, was desperate to understand. My name is Alera, she repeated, her voice finding a quiet strength. I was a civilian surveyor. I was at the orbital station at Sector 9. The name of the place sent another ripple of pain through the room. Sector 9, their greatest defeat. An entire battle fleet, led by their most beloved commander, just gone. The official story was they were ambushed, overwhelmed, and annihilated. A tragedy, plain and simple. The official report is a lie, Alera said, her words hitting like a shockwave. You weren't ambushed. You were betrayed. Your supply lines were cut. Your communications were jammed. The enemy knew exactly where you'd be. She paused. Commander Kythar knew he was leading his fleet into a trap. But he also knew that if he pulled back, the enemy would roll right onto the colony world of Cygnus X1, a civilian world, unprotected. Millions of lives. Her grey eyes swept across the chamber. So he went forward. He chose to sacrifice his fleet to buy that colony time. He chose to save your people, and then she told them the real story. Not the clean, sanitized version from a report, but the terrifying reality. She spoke of a maelstrom of plasma fire and exploding ships. She described how Kythar, realizing his command ship was the main target, ordered all power to the shields, fighting a brilliant, desperate retreat to draw the enemy away from fleeing civilian transports. We were on the last transport, Alera said, her voice dropping. A small, unarmed passenger liner. An enemy cruiser broke through and came for us. We were dead. Our shields were gone, our engines were failing. She looked down at her own chest. Then we saw it. Kythar's ship, the Indomitable, moved between us and the enemy. It was already crippled, burning. Its main shields were down. But Commander Kythar himself stood on the bridge, projecting his own personal shield, his Kytanian crystal shield, to cover the hole in his ship's defenses. He used his own body to protect us. Her voice hitched for just a second. The enemy fired. The blast was immense. It hit the Indomitable. Commander Kythar's shield held for 3.7 seconds. Long enough for our ship to jump to safety. Long enough for us to live. She looked up at Vorlag. When the shield overloaded, it shattered. It exploded outward. That blast crippled the enemy cruiser that fired it, giving the last of Kythar's fleet the opening they needed to escape after the battle. After they were gone, we went back, she continued softly. I went back. There was nothing left but wreckage. The official rescue teams declared the sector a total loss. They wrote off everyone as acceptable losses. She said those words with a quiet, burning anger, but some of us survived. Scattered, hiding in the debris. I found the pauldron of a lieutenant who defended a medbay until his last breath. I found the gauntlet of an honor guard who died saving an escape pod. And embedded in a piece of the Indomitable's hull, I found this. She tapped the crystal plate on her chest. The largest piece of Commander Kythar's shield. It saved my life. It saved all our lives. It was still radiating energy, still trying to protect something. I did not scavenge, Ilera declared, her voice ringing with truth. I remembered. I took these pieces not as trophies, but as promises. A promise that the fallen would not be forgotten. A promise that their sacrifice would mean something. This armor isn't an insult to your honor. It is your honor. It's the story of your greatest heroes who died for something more than a polished suit of armor. Silence. A profound, soul-shaking silence filled the tribunal. The shame was so thick you could taste it. The warriors who had laughed now stared at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. High Commander Vorlag stood before her, his own face a mask of agony and reverence. He had mourned Kythar as a fallen warrior, but this human had shown him that Kythar's legacy wasn't failure, but the ultimate success, saving the innocent, slowly. Deliberately, Vorlag, the highest-ranking officer of the Xylos Dominion, removed his own helmet and set it on the floor, and then he dropped to one knee before the human. The sound of his knee hitting stone echoed like a thunderclap. One by one, others followed. The old veteran who recognized the pauldron, the archive keeper, the arrogant young warrior who had laughed the loudest. Soon, half the chamber was kneeling, their heads bowed, not to a scavenger, but to a keeper of the faith. A living memorial to the honor they had almost forgotten. Magistrate Krell just stood there, dumbfounded. Vorlag looked up at Ilera. The charges are dismissed, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Captain Ilera, your armor is a holy relic, and you have honored us by carrying it. He rose to his feet. We offer you a place of honor, command of a house, resources, a fleet, anything. We ask that you teach us what it means to truly remember. Ilera looked at the sea of kneeling warriors, then at the pleading face of the High Commander. She gave a small, weary smile. My journey isn't over, Commander, she said softly. There are other promises to keep, other stories to carry. She turned and walked away. Her mismatched armor didn't clank like junk anymore. It chimed, each piece a note in a hymn of sacrifice. As she walked out of the silent tribunal, her broken armor shone with more honor than all the polished metal she left behind, and that's the story of Ilera and her armor. What a powerful way to carry the memory of heroes. What did you think? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this, a like and a subscription would be amazing. It really helps the channel bring you more stories like this. Thanks for listening. The tale of the human in patchwork armor became a legend in the Xylos Dominion. It sparked a cultural reckoning, a shift from valuing the appearance of honor to valuing the actions that create it. Warriors began adding small, unpolished tokens to their own pristine armor, a shard from a fallen friend's ship, a spent energy cell from a desperate fight. It was a sign. They understood the lesson Ilera taught them. True honor isn't how you look in glory, but what you're willing to sacrifice when you stand in the fire.